guys, welcome back to the Bass Tutor. My name is Tyler Fry and I'm the Bass Tutor. So guys, if you clicked on today's video and this is your first time, welcome to the channel and I really hope you enjoy this video. And if you do, make sure you join the Bass Tutor community by subscribing and like the videos and share them with your friends. My mission here is to teach people how to become a great angler, and if you already know a lot about fishing, I want to help you become a better angler. Now, with that being said, today we're going to continue my top 5 favorite lures for fall fishing. And if you've watched any of the other videos, I've already made one about fishing clear lakes, I've made one about fishing grassy lakes, and due to popular demand, I wanted to make one about my top 5 favorite pond lures. And so, because my subscriber base lives all across the United States and even some in Canada, I wanted to make sure that I picked 5 lures that are going to work anywhere at any pond, anytime in the fall. And so you may not see your favorite lure on here, and the reason for that is a frog is going to work better in the fall in the south than it might in the north. Because someone in Canada, they may have already had a major cold front that come through that just prevented their fish from wanting to hit a topwater. Now, I'm not saying that's true, I'm not really sure. But with that being said, that's the reason that it's not on here, because a frog may work better for someone in the southeast of the United States or in the south than it would someone that lives up north and that has a lot of cold fronts coming through this time of year, and it's really just driving that temperature up and down. Which brings me into my next point, which is always pay attention to your pond. So a pond is a smaller body of water typically than a lake. And so with that being said, the temperature in a pond is going to drop dramatically compared to a lake. So a 10 or 15 degree temperature change on the outside may not affect a lake as much as it does a pond. A pond could potentially drop 5 or 10 degrees depending on this, or maybe even more. Versus a lake that is larger, the temperature is not going to be affected too much. And so keep that in mind whenever you're deciding on what lure you want to start off with. Another quick tip I have that a lot of people don't realize, but when I'm fishing a pond, I actually do the opposite of what the popular belief is. I actually start off with a more subtle finesse presentation than I do a faster power fishing technique. And you might say, well, that's just completely the opposite of what I've learned. Everybody always says cover a lot of water, get the body of water broken down, and if it's tough, fish finesse. Well, that's how I was raised and taught too. But the reason I do it the opposite in a pond is you've got to understand that a pond is typically smaller. And with that being said, the fish are going to be able to feel your footsteps. They're going to be able to hear lures that are making a lot of ruckus. And, you know, a lot of the times that kind of scares them. And so if you're coming up to a pond, stomping real hard, the fish are feeling your vibrations, and you pull a buzzbait out, you sling it out there, and you just start reeling it real fast, it's making a lot of noise, a lot of commotion. A lot of the times you're going to get bit, without a doubt. And a lot of the times the buzzbait bite may be the best thing in the world. But what if I told you that you may pick up 2 or 3 fish on that buzzbait whenever you could have thrown this Fluke out there, for instance, picked up 4 or 5, then throw the buzzbait through there, got a reaction bite, and caught another 1 or 2. So you kind of just take that into consideration. You know, I'm not telling you what to do, but that's just something that I personally do. So you can kind of see that in some of my videos, that's kind of how I operate my pond fishing. So, with that being said, I'm going to first start off with a lure that's really great at doing both. It's great at covering water, it's not super loud and super obnoxious, and it just gets bit by all the fish that are hungry and by the ones that are going to react to something. And that's a swim jig. The swim jig has done a lot of work for me this year. And if you go back and watch some of the previous videos I've made pond fishing, a lot of them you'll see this very swim jig in particular. All this is a Strike King KVD swim jig with a bluegill skirt and a twin tail zoom grub. And it does really great at mimicking a lot of the bait fish that live in ponds, something like a crappie or a bluegill or something of that nature. Now obviously if you've got a lot of shad in your pond, you may want to throw something like a white or a silver color. It just really depends on what color your bait fish are. Or if the water is very dark and really dingy, or it's a really overcast day, you may want to switch up to a black and blue with a little bit bigger trailer, like a Rage Craw by Strike King, or just something that's going to put off a little bit more vibration in the water. And so the second lure on the list is going to be a fluke. I love to throw a fluke in ponds, especially because they can get through cover really great. And so a lot of people, if you live on a pond that has a lot of rocks on it, it doesn't have a ton of grass or a ton of wood to get snagged up on, you may want to throw a jerkbait instead of the fluke. That's perfectly fine. A jerkbait does a really great job. But a fluke is going to come through a lot of cover. You're going to be able to get it through your grass lake or your grass ponds. You're going to be able to get it through your wooded ponds, laydowns, docks, brush, all this stuff. A fluke does really great. You can cast it, you can skip it, you can pitch it. There's a ton of different things that you can do with a fluke. And so that is why it's the most, it's one of the most versatile lures out there on the list. And so you're really mimicking a dying baitfish. And so this is another instance where you want to mimic the baitfish in your pond. If it's predominantly bluegill, throw a bluegill color. If you got a little stain in the water, throw a sexy shad color. If you got a lot of shad, throw a white color. A white color really does great in just about any pond as well, because it puts off a large glow to it and it looks like a huge meal to these fish. And this time of year, these fish are really trying to feed up for the winter time. And so you're going to get days where this white just works really great. But, a lot of the times you kind of want to match the hatch, as the old saying goes, and mimic the baitfish in your pond. And so there's sometimes that this fluke's not going to work. When the wind starts getting up and it starts blowing into your grassy ponds and it starts muddying up the water some, that's when you're going to want to throw something like this spinnerbait. Now, for you guys that live in the south and you have a lot of grass that don't die very fast, you may want to switch this out to a bladed jig. But if you are able to get away with it on the windy days or the days with a little chop on the water, throw the spinnerbait. The spinnerbait does a phenomenal job at mimicking a lot of balls of shad, a lot of bluegill. It does a really great job of just getting their attention. And so on the days that I'm fishing a pond that's got smaller bait fish, I actually throw this crappie spinnerbait. This spinnerbait is intended to catch crappie, and it does really great at mimicking smaller bait fish like a bluegill or like a small crappie. But if you want to throw something that's going to put off a lot of flash, it's going to mimic a shad really great, throw something a little bit larger. This one's actually a 1/2 ounce War Eagle. I've put some bigger blades on this thing, and it's going to mimic your shad and a lot of your bait schools that are going to put off a lot of flash. And so the spinnerbait does a great job of that, and it does really great at calling up fish. So if your fish aren't really paying attention, they're not really biting good, but they see that thing travel over top of them, they're going to want to react to it a lot better. And then you can also use the spinnerbait as your cold fronts start coming in, and you might want to switch to a larger Colorado blade, which is just a circular blade that's going to put off more thump, and you're able to slow it down and just get those fish's attention as that thing comes by them. And so that's just something you can take into consideration. Now, there's sometimes that the fish just aren't going to be reacting to something like a bait fish. And so that's whenever I'm going to start throwing something like a Texas rig. A Texas rig is a super great bait to cover the bottom of ponds. And in my opinion, it does great at covering the ponds that have a lot of grass in them and that have a really soft bottom. So usually, in a lake, we would want to throw a big jig, a big bulky jig. But when you throw a jig into a pond, and a lot of the ponds that I fish, they have more of a silty bottom. And so the jig kind of just drops down into that grass and you can't really see them. Or they drop down into that mud. And so that's kind of a problem. So that's when I started figuring out that a Texas rig is a lot more versatile for me in all the ponds that I fish and stuff like that. So I like to put on a little 1/8 ounce weight or a little 1/4 ounce weight, and I like to fish a little Texas rig. Something like this Lizard or this Zoom Speed Craw. Or any type of crawl type lure will work great. But what you're able to do with these is you're able to pitch them to the last little bit of grass that's sticking up. You may see a little grass patch that's kind of off the bank a little bit. You can pitch over there to them and get bit. Or you can cast it out there a long way and just real slowly drag it. There's a lot of different things that you can do with it. You can pitch it into your brush piles. You can skip it. There's just a ton of ways to fish this Texas rig. And that does a really great job of covering the bottom. And so we've covered the top, we've kind of covered some suspended lures, but one that I like to throw a lot that's a really, really finesse presentation is a stick bait. Now, regardless of what brand you like, they all work really great. For me personally, I don't like to throw the Yamamotos as much as I do a little bit cheaper stick bait. For me, a Yamamoto is like a tournament lake fishing lure, because whenever you're throwing a Yamamoto, they're a little bit more expensive, honestly. They do a really great job of catching fish, but something like this Yumdinger is a little bit stronger, in my opinion, and will hold up for a few more fish. And even if they don't, they're super cheap. They're a fraction of the price of the Gary Yamamoto. So if I'm fishing a pond, I'm going to fish a little bit cheaper lure. And so you can Texas rig these weightless like you did the Fluke, or my favorite way to rig them is you can wacky rig them. So if you've never seen a wacky rig, all it is a small 1/0 hook, or maybe a size 1 is typically the sizes that I go to. And you can see that it's just a little short shank hook. A drop shot hook or an eco hook works really great. And you just take your worm, you rig it right on there. You just poke the middle of the worm and it sits right in the middle of the hook. And all you do is you take a spinning setup typically, and you're going to skip it around trees. You're going to cast it and cover a little water with it. And the fish just really love eating them. I don't really know why. And I don't know that Gary Yamamoto knew why when he made them. But they just straight up get bit. A stick bait is a super phenomenal lure. And especially in this fall time, whenever cold fronts are coming in and out, the water is fluctuating, a lot of the times you can get a few extra bites on a stick bait, regardless of whether it's Texas rigged or whether it's wacky rigged. You can even throw them on a weighted Texas rig if you want. It's just however you want to do it. They're super versatile and they just catch fish. So guys, this is my top 5 lures for pond fishing, especially in the fall period of the year. And we've got one more video coming out in this series that's coming up really soon, and that is fishing dirty or muddy water. And you're going to see a lot of familiar lures on it, and you're going to see some that aren't so familiar. And so stay tuned for those. That's going to help a lot of people out that have to fish like river systems, that fish lakes that get blown out by wind or rain a lot, or even your dirtier ponds. And so I've also got another video coming up in the late fall where we're going to talk about my top 5 favorite late fall lures. So you've still got 2 more videos to keep an eye out on whenever it comes to fall fishing, bait-wise. And the reason I'm going to do the late fall one is that fall to winter transition is a super tough time for a lot of people, but it can also be a super great time to catch big fish, because these fish have time to feed up all the fall, and they're just wanting to get in those last few big meals to get full before wintertime, whenever they're going to slow down their eating, and it's just going to get kind of tough for a while. And so there's going to be some big baits. There's hopefully going to be some videos coming up where I'm able to start throwing those big baits and getting those big bites. And so stay tuned. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and leave me a comment of what you'd like to see. And also let me know what your top 5 favorite fall baits are. They may be completely different from mine, but these are just the most versatile lures that I've found for pond fishing. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I hope that I'm able to see you all out on the water as we all get out there and wet a line. We'll see you guys later.